Okay, it's a little sweaty, but that won't stop the news. Chance Miller, 9 to 5 Mac. Apple announces a quote, multi-year, multi-billion dollar, unquote, deal with Broadcom to develop and manufacture 5G and wireless components, including F-bar filters in the United States. I don't know what an F-bar filter is. The notion, though, that they're going to announce a major deal for the one of the few remaining aspects of Apple devices that Apple does not themselves already control is interesting. The fact that it's being done in the United States, I imagine, facilitates meaningful, tax breaks from the government, both at a federal and a state level, wherever the facilities of the manufacturing is being done. So good for Broadcom, I suppose. I hope. In the past, there have certainly been cases where component supplier does a deal with Apple, and that deal turns out to be a bit of a Lando and Darth Vader situation. If you don't get that reference, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to explain it. And I would also imagine that this is, again, a stepping stone toward Apple ultimately taking responsibility for the baseband components, the modem, the low-level electrical engineering work that allows the device to connect to cellular networks. So, is it a multi-year deal? Is it a big deal? Yes, all of those things are true, but let's not trick ourselves into thinking that it will go on forever. Yuvraj Malik, Reuters. Shutterstock plans to acquire GIPHY from Meta for $53 million in cash after the United Kingdom's CMA blocked Meta's acquisition in 2022. Meta can still access GIPHY content. I don't recall the details of Meta's apparently attempted but not complete acquisition of GIPHY. Shutterstock buying them, yeah, be the vertical that provides repositories of images that are used broadly across the network. That's Shutterstock's business. It's a good business for someone to be in. It doesn't surprise me that Meta tried to acquire GIPHY, but yeah, this is a more appropriate deal. Quite frankly, I think the question that this poses is at what point is the business of providing the underlying sort of imagery substrate for GIFs and other forms of mimetic communication. At what point is that business going to evolve and sort of mature, right? I mean, if you did a Google image search on the GIPHY dataset or the Twitter dataset or any social network you can think of, if you did a reverse image search for the right freeze frame of Justin Timberlake from the social network, you'd find millions of slightly different usages or interpretations, all, I imagine, predominantly trying to communicate the change the name, it's cleaner meme. I would argue that there's a business to be had in being the source for the image that's sliced out of that film so that attribution, not necessarily for commercial purposes, but at least some notion of where did this image come from, what is its history, what is its provenance. Someone's got to do that work, or someone ought to do that work on behalf of everyone else in the network. And frankly, why not Shutterstock? Kyle Wiggers, TechCrunch. Anthropic, a generative AI startup co-founded by OpenAI veterans, raised a $450 million Series C led by Spark Capital with Google, Salesforce, and Zoom participating. Related, Mike Butcher, TechCrunch. London-based Builder.ai, which offers low-code app building tools, raised a $250 million Series D, led by the Qatar Investment Authority, taking its funding to more than $450 million. I suppose these stories are related insofar as they are both sort of applications of the AI slash LLM slash transformer technology that is, again, I would say thankfully, diffusing throughout the tech industry as fast as it can, faster than we can keep up. The Anthropic deal, yeah, raised $500,000 from Spark Capital, Google. Zoom participating in that deal is interesting. Spark Capital, I remember going to a cocktail party at Spark Capital office in San Francisco nearly 20 years ago. Silver hair. So good for them. The notion that there are open AI veterans is amusing to me, but I'm sure accurate. And then this related story, Builder AI tools for building apps with low to no code expertise. The Qatar Investment Authority doubling the amount of runway that that business has to $500 million. There's a conversation to be had at another layer in the stack, which is what is the right order of magnitude of financing that a business needs to take on, particularly if it's employing these sorts of tools. Maybe the more succinct version of that question is what percentage of Anthropic or Builder AI's outside financing is going to be used to just pay bills to OpenAI or to GCP or Azure or whatever other entity is going to provide the raw horsepower that facilitates these app experiences. That question will be an interesting one to discover the answer to over time, I guess. New York Times. U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy releases a 19-page report arguing social media can have a, quote, profound risk of harm, unquote, for kids and teens, and calls for action. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. I'm inclined to agree with the Surgeon General's findings based on nothing more than the 20 odd years of experience that I have personally on social media, the experience that I have observed of the people in my life, and the experience I have as a parent. Relating to other human beings over the network is drastically more difficult and complicated and prone to, I want to say failure, but degradation of signal than most people recognize, I would say. It's difficult enough to sit with one other human being face to face with a pre-existing history of empathy, love, investment, and come to a shared understanding around anything more complicated than, is this a battery or a ballpoint pen? Language is its own living organism, and we have evolved as animals to rely on language in the context of the physical environment we inhabit. You strip that away and you replace it with words or sounds or even images like this one, but consumed absent all of the other aspects of what it means to relate to another human being, it's no surprise that people can be misinterpreted, that meaning or motive or bias can both be thought to exist where it doesn't, and to be there but not be adequately communicated. Marshall McLuhan was right. We only ever hear the sort of 5-word version. The medium is the message. There's a much longer version of that thought, and I encourage you to go find it because I'm not going to attempt to regurgitate it and therefore butcher it. But the point is how information is communicated between people has a meaningful impact on the substance of that communication. And if you're not paying attention to that, regardless of your age, you're, I think, asking for trouble. Reuters sources. In 2020 and 2021, Binance commingled customer funds with revenue. A source says the sums ran into billions of dollars in Silvergate-held accounts. Crypto malarkey. It comes for everyone. Yeah, that's all I got there. Wired. Leaked responses from 20 countries for an EU proposal show the majority favor some form of scanning encrypted messages, with Spain wanting a EU-wide E to EE ban. Spain's not getting what it wants. Let's make that perfectly clear, because internet, to quote Donald Glover, like, you can't put this back in a box. Again, we should always mark a little footnote that says never underestimate what, Europol and the NSA and MI6 are capable of decoding, but are never going to reveal that they're capable of decoding. So maybe all the end-to-end encryption that's on the market today is scannable by some relatively constrained set of state actors. That could be possible. But if we grant the premise that that's not true, right? That there are not means of cracking the encryption that wraps up, say, signal messages. No, like, this is the definition of a crisis of authority. I completely sympathize with the point of view of a state authority, which says, what if bad actors use these tools to perpetrate bad things? Won't bad things happen? Aren't bad things more likely to happen because we cannot observe the planning, the communication, the facilitation of those bad things because they're happening inside of encrypted communication spaces? Yeah, yeah. I don't know how to provide a neat solution to that moral quandary. All I do know is that there are as many, if not probably more, instances where providing the means for secured private communication spaces to individuals who are earnest people on the planet empowers them as individuals, empowers them to take action against other individuals who may be oppressing them, against groups who may be targeting them, against state authorities who may not be interested in facilitating their human rights, or more to the point, may be interested in curtailing their human rights. I'm always going to land on that side of the table. That's why these tools need to exist, because the individual ought to be equipped through technology to improve their own station in life in this incredibly short moment that they have. The fact that bad people, bad guys, might use these same set of tools to do bad things, you're not wrong, but that's not enough of a reason to take the technology away from people who are just trying to live their lives and need this technology in order to do that. Chris Welch, The Verge. Warner Brothers Discovery launches Max, offering substantially more 4K content than HBO Max via its $19.99 per month Ultimate plan, above the $15.99 ad-free plan. The ongoing streaming wars, like, there's a band of customer who are price insensitive and who will sign up for anything and everything. And if we compare what they're going to spend in 2023 to have stuff to watch versus what they paid in 2003 to have stuff to watch, and we do the inflation adjustment, I'm going to place chips on the table and say we're paying more today than we were before. And could you make the argument that you're getting more for your money today? Absolutely, I think that's true. I think like the quantum of content has grown. I don't think you could argue that. Still, $20 a month so that whenever the mood strikes you or strikes anyone in your household, I suppose, you can consume content in the highest quality image and sound possible. I don't know, it starts to make truly a la carte experiences, once again, like the conversation we were having in 2023, seem far more appealing, quite frankly. That getting to a place where you decide, I'm going to spend my money to consume this discrete piece of content, feels more tenable and of a transaction than to just keep the tab running. And if you have something that looks interesting, then I'll watch that. And if you don't, I'll watch something else somewhere else. In 2003, the issue was, I don't want to pay for 200 channels of cable television if I only watch 4 of them. Quite frankly, I think the conversation to be had now is, I don't want to pay $20 a month to have access to your library of content if I only watch 3 things out of that library every month. Give me the ability to pay $3 a hit, $4 a hit, $5 a hit to watch each of those things, right? Like, windowing is a well understood strategy in the media business. And I just think that as the streaming businesses continue to sort of expand their presence and try to represent outsized value such that they can command $20 a month, it's going to start to be apparent, I think, to more and more people that what makes more sense is to say, well, how much does it cost to just watch this movie? Or how much does it cost to just be able to consume this season of a television show? That's, I find that to be the interesting place to have the conversation about the streaming wars. Jess Weatherbed, The Verge. Adobe launches generative fill for Photoshop, one of the first Creative Cloud apps to use its generative AI Firefly tool in beta, rolling out fully in H2 2023. I saw a demo of this on Twitter this morning. Karen X Chang did a good job. The the part of the demo that made this especially compelling was taking what they had built in Photoshop, right, which was a scene, right, a sort of impressionistic landscape painting, and adding areas in the image where the Firefly tool could generatively replace the content. So you want to think of it almost like a Mad Lib, but in painting form, right? This area can change, and this area can change, and this area can change. They built that whole asset in Photoshop, and then through, I don't exactly know what tool chain, rendered it out as an AR interactive filter for Instagram. So you could hold your device against a wall, it would project the asset onto the wall, and then using your hand, you could manipulate the asset. The fact that that's possible is wonderful. As an old, it warms my heart that it's baked into Photoshop. I like the idea that 30 plus years on, Photoshop is still where state of the art graphics work is being done. Thank you, John. Aside from that, though, we'll see. It's how does it get applied, right? Getting applied as Instagram filters are interesting. Getting applied as Instagram content, I would argue, is even more interesting, right? How do you break through the Web 2 idea, which is I crafted an image and then I publish the image and it's static and it just lives there and you can consume it, but it's kind of baked. I think the whole advantage of generative synthetic visual arts tools is that they can evolve over time. So what do things produced with this Photoshop capability look like if they're published on a platform that supports ongoing interactivity? I think that's the macro scale version of this being, it came to my part of the world recently, but I think it's traveled all over the world. The immersive Van Gogh art exhibit, right? It's one thing to be able to go and sit in front of haystacks or Starry Night and sort of take in that finished piece of work. It's another thing to sort of do the Mary Poppins and jump in to one of those environments and then see what happens when you exist within it. That's where I think this Photoshop capability, the AI Firefly tool that Adobe has built, that's where I'm looking forward to seeing it appear. Andrew J. Hawkins, The Verge. Uber and Waymo announce a, quote, multi-year partnership to, quote, make Waymo driver available to more people, unquote, via Uber, starting in Phoenix with a, quote, set number of cars. That's a deal. That is, I think this could have legs. Uber has built a mature business. There's an ongoing conversation about whether or not that business is profitable, whether the unit economics, obey the laws of physics, if you will. I don't know what the current state of that conversation is, but Uber becoming the platform through which Waymo's self-driving technology can go to market, that's really interesting. Yes, is it going to start in the tutorial computer driving landscape that is Arizona? Yeah, sure, why not? The question of how and when it rolls out more widely, that'll be interesting to watch. I just hope that they have a successful test because, yeah, if we're going to get to a place where software can operate passenger vehicles, you need, I think you need a business like Google's Waymo unit and a business like Uber to work together. I don't think that anybody can pull it off owning the entire stack as much as Tesla believes that it's possible. New York Times. U.S. prosecutors have gathered over 6 million pages of documents ahead of Sam Bankman-Fried's trial, an unusually large amount that underscores his legal difficulties. Does it underscore or illustrate his legal difficulties? I don't know how much 6 million documents is, what that number is compared to other similar cases. So it's hard to say. It's a big number. Apparently, it's an unusually large number. The the SBF thing is going to be a saga. Again, we got to all look forward to Michael Lewis's retelling of the story. The one little footnote that I'll put here is, are the attorneys using a chat GPT or some other LLM tool to summarize those 6 million pages of documents? That I'd be curious to know. Sundar Pichai, Financial Times. Building AI responsibly matters more than competition. One company cannot fulfill AI's potential alone, and global cooperation, especially between the United States and the European Union, will be key. If this isn't the crisis of authority story of the year, I'm not sure what is. Call that a long bet if you want. The CEO of Google publishes an op-ed saying that businesses will have to cooperate and that state governments, in particular the United States and the European Union, will also have to cooperate in order for AI to be used responsibly. Okay, I don't disagree with you on its face. Is there the possibility that we have discovered something like the nuclear reaction that facilitated the creation of the atomic bomb? Yeah, sure, it's possible. I have not educated myself on the technology to such a degree that I could speak to the chances of that. But you also can't help but see a between this statement and Altman's testimony to Congress last week. Last week, I think so. The established players getting out early with a position that says working with government and creating a consortium of trusted entities is the most responsible way to deal with this technology. They could be right. They could also be, to borrow the phrase that I heard on the All In podcast from Chamath this weekend, pulling a ladder up behind them. I don't know how you're going to do both, right? The first thing that came to mind as I was listening to those lunatics talking to each other is some mixture, and actually I think this was something that Chamath put forth. While you can have the sort of laboratory experiment of building a model that does X or Y or Z, if you want to utilize the sort of heavy metal of an Azure or a Google Cloud platform or an AWS, you're going to have to go through some level of affirming that you're an earnest actor on the network and not an agent of chaos. Maybe that's possible, maybe it's not, but we shall see. Who, Jones, Reuters. Securities watchdog IOSCO proposes the first global crypto regulations covering conflicts of interest, custody, and more, aiming to finalize them by year end. I'm not familiar with the IOSCO, but any entity that's willing to stand up and propose some set of regulations for cryptocurrency as an industry, as a technology, as an applied technology, worth reading, probably. The extent to which you see any state authority be willing to participate in the process of drafting regulations like that, to work in public, in concert with others, that strikes me as slightly longer odds scenario. But not that it's strictly related to the other story about Sundar Pichai. This is exactly the arena where the major authorities, state governments, large corporations, ought to look to work together and ought to work in public with industry in order to come up with the baseline, the floor of acceptable behavior. Because like with AI, we've figured out how to code value and move it around the network. We're not putting that capability back. So we got to figure out what to do. New York Times. China's Micron ban could help the government boost its domestic memory chip industry, a sector where China has a toehold in its competition with the United States. Domestic chip production, it's an aspect of sort of era of cyber warfare. Who's building the best chips, and are your nation's chips competitive with the chips produced by one of your geopolitical competitors, adversaries? That'll be especially interesting to watch. Bobby Allen, NPR. TikTok sues Montana over its new law intending to ban the app, citing the First Amendment, the state's lack of authority on national security issues, and more. The Montana bill doesn't go into effect until January. I would give even odds that it's possible that TikTok is able to get a ruling invalidating Montana's action before January. We'll see. Devin Coldway, TechCrunch. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman, President Greg Brockman, and Chief Scientist Ilya Sutskever say the world will likely need a regulatory body for superintelligence. I would have hoped, if you went back and asked me as a child, or even just 25 years ago as a child, what will bring about a meaningful and functional one world government, I wouldn't have chosen figuring out how to maintain the primacy of human beings in relation to some form of synthetic consciousness. But here we are. Good. Yeah. What that regulatory body is going to do, the extent to which it may stifle competition or enshrine certain commercial entities and keep others out. Like all of those things are totally up in the air. And sadly, OpenAI can bang this particular drum of we need regulation from state authorities as much as they want. There's little to no guarantee that those state authorities are equipped to craft meaningful regulation. I suppose then the alternative point of view here is which actor in the AI industry is going to step up and say, we, the commercial interests, owe it to our fellow members of our species, and to say nothing of all other species on the planet, to work together ourselves to regulate each other in advance or even in absence of governments enforcing regulations on us. That's what I would like to see, I guess. Umar Shakir, The Verge. Amazon announces the 11-inch Fire Max 11, offering a sleeker design, slim bezels, MediaTek SoC, support for a new keyboard with trackpad, and a stylus from $230. Amazon's hardware unit continues to be this interesting beast. In some ways, it's, I don't know, like in other product categories, if you go to Amazon, you look for AA batteries or sweatpants. You get the Amazon Basics version of the product as a result in your return, your search return. All of Amazon's hardware, it's like the Amazon Basics version of something else that exists in the world. The fact that Amazon will sell you now an 11-inch tablet computer machine, which has support for a stylus, support for a keyboard and a trackpad pointing device, they're offering you the same core experience that Apple offers you with an iPad, right? Buy this 11 odd inch iPad, buy this pencil, buy this trackpad, walk out the door, you now have sort of a state of the art personal computing machine. Problem is Apple's out the door price around $1,000. Amazon's going to offer you the same thing for a fifth of that. Cool, except I'm certain that the experience will not be comparable. But the fact that it exists is, I suppose, a good thing. As a nerd, the thing that I would like to see is for the Kindle brand to slowly evolve in this direction. Right? If I had Andy Jassy's ear and I'd say like, okay, it's Acquisition Tuesday, go buy Remarkable and then ship a Kindle device that gives me the ability to take notes, respond to email, read, and write. And that's it. I can't communicate with anybody except over email. Like there's no super high speed chat interface. You don't have to ship signal on the device, although I'm sure many people would make the case that that would be rad. That's what I would like to see instead of the Fire branding, because have any of Amazon's Fire products really turned anybody on in any way? I don't know. Lucas Shaw, Bloomberg. As music revenue slows, record labels may force Spotify, which has never changed its US base plan's price, to follow Apple, Amazon, and others in raising prices. I can understand that point of view, that if you're Sony or UMG or I don't know how many record labels we have at this point. It might be down to three. That they would want to put the squeeze on Spotify and say, you need to return slightly more value in exchange for us allowing your business to exist. I completely see that point of view. My problem with that is, what are Spotify's profit margins? They're not great. And you can sort of squint and look at Spotify and see like effectively a subsidiary of the music labels, a thing that provides me as the individual the means of experiencing every piece of music that's published by these labels. To what end? Taylor Swift tickets cost as much as a, you know, small family car, depending on what seat in the house you want. Like the place where value is created, where monetary value is captured in popular music, it stopped being listening to the music a long time ago. Do we pay a little bit? Does everybody pay effectively the price of one compact disc from 1998 every month in order to have access to the celestial jukebox? Yes, we do. And it's a fabulous experience. The problem is, as an individual, even if I factor out the like, I'm a parent, I don't have a tremendous amount of free time or you know, willingness to go out and see a show that starts at 10 o'clock at night. I got to get up and get the dude to school. Like, I'm not going to spend the amount of money that it takes to see a top shelf music act perform. I'm just not going to do it. Like, I can't afford it. So there are people who can, and that's great. But if the music labels are looking for a way to capture more value from the artists that they help bring to market, Spotify is not where you should be looking. Live Nation is where you should be looking. Either that or buy Spotify outright so that they don't have to worry about what their profit margins look like and just run it as the thing that it has been for quite some time, which is the advertising mechanism that facilitates people buying the ultra limited release LP, the vinyl, or the t-shirt, or the baseball cap, or the concert ticket. Chloe Zhang, Vice. Some blue check Twitter accounts, one pretending to be Bloomberg, spread an AI generated image of an explosion at the Pentagon. The stock market briefly dipped. I remember Roderick mentioning at some point this was in 2019, maybe 2018, that the deep fake capability was going to get us to a place where some apparently real event will be propagated across the internet, and then it will be found out to be false. And as a result of that, there will be a trend will begin and grow where reasonable people conclude that anything you see on the internet is de facto false, de facto spurious. And I don't know that that's going to happen. I used to believe that it would. I don't think I do now. And this is, I think, supporting evidence for that. The stock market briefly dipped. Why briefly? Because humanity as an organism self-corrected really fast and was able to do that because of the internet. Somebody generated false imagery that there was an explosion at the Pentagon. That would, if it really happened, be a significant issue. But it didn't really happen. And we were able to determine that it didn't really happen super quick. Were we able to determine that because the AI generated image could be fed to another piece of software and it could be determined to be inauthentic? I don't know. Did we determine that the explosion didn't happen because someone went to the spot in front of the Pentagon and took their own photo and said, there's no explosion here, this is bullshit? Maybe that's what happened. Maybe it's a mixture of both of those things. Maybe it's a secret third thing. The point is, just as we now have the capability to potentially fool each other, we have equally enhanced capability for correcting the record. And that cycle time just gets quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker. And to me, that's a good thing. So the fact that some blue check Twitter accounts propagated it, welcome to the jungle. People who are willing to pay $8 a month are as likely to be fooled by a modest Photoshop job as people who don't. I don't think that part of the story is especially relevant. What is relevant is that it is tools like Twitter that enable that cycle of, looks like something bad might have happened. Oh, it turns out it's fake. Tools like Twitter are what enable that to happen. It's why they should exist. I would argue it's probably why Elon bought the thing. Catherine Shu, TechCrunch. Singapore-based Bandlab Technologies, offering a music creation and fan engagement service with more than 60 million registered users, raised $25 million in a Series B1, valuing it at $425 million. Music creation and fan engagement. If I had to guess, how do you do Bandcamp where every user in the system is free and enabled to take the original work of an artist on the service for whom they are a fan and use that art to create music of their own? How do you take the best of Bandcamp and the best of YouTube and smash them together? What does that look like? Maybe YouTube's not even the right example. Maybe it's Netflix, right? Netflix or Max or whatever. The analogy there is, I'm a really big fan of Beyonce. How does this tool enable me to make things with Beyonce's art? Is Beyonce going to sign up for this service tomorrow? I kind of doubt it. But is an artist from Bandcamp going to sign up for this service tomorrow? Absolutely. Why? Because if you're a young band, your core problem to solve is awareness. Nobody knows we exist because we're one of however many billions of sardines there are swimming around in the ocean right now. So enabling our fans to make things with what we make and therefore allow those works to propagate, that could be an especially interesting business to operate. So Bandlab Technologies might be one to look at. Tage Kene Okafor, TechCrunch. South African digital banking startup Time Bank raised a $77.8 million pre-Series C, led by Norskin 22 and Blue Earth Capital, after a $110 million Series B in February of 2021. Just a side note, somebody who is tangentially related to the venture business around 2002. What is a pre-Series C? What is to go back to the Bandlab story, a Series B1? Leave it to the finance dicks of the world to find more arcane, sort of obtuse ways to describe a very straightforward behavior, which is we got a pile of money from this set of people, and then some time passed, and then we got a pile of money from that set of people, and then some time passed, and then we got a pile of money from that set of people. It's a really basic thing, and I can't help but see phrases like pre-Series C and think you're obfuscating this for no one's benefit but your own. But that's beside the point. Does a digital banking startup in South Africa need to raise? Yeah, absolutely. Every pocket of humanity around the planet which has had the opportunity to leapfrog tradition or to leapfrog past pieces of sort of the technological ecosystem, I think you see interesting things happening. And just as Estonia did this by coming back into their independence in the mid 90s and therefore getting to skip out on a lot of the 70s and 80s technology that the West adopted, but the Soviet Union did not. African nations moving forward with how do we transact and move units of value over the network. I want them to lead so badly. I want the continent of Africa to show the rest of the world this is how you enable people to transact in global marketplaces using all of the tools and techniques that exist in the early 21st century. Yossi Matthias, the keyword. Google expands its AI flood forecasting tool, Flood Hub, to 460 million people from 20 countries, up to 48 hours in advance, to 80 countries, up to 7 days in advance. There's a lot of good jokes and bad jokes to be made at the expense of Google's old mission statement, don't be evil. This is, I think, one of those things. Again, I've been around a long time, so maybe I'm just nostalgic. Google taking on the responsibility of providing the early warning system for natural disasters, ecological calamities, whatever combination of words you want to use there. That's awesome. Keep doing it. Be the state of the art for alerting people to seismic activity, right? I mean, when I lived in San Francisco, there was a Twitter account that was just hooked to a USGS computer system somewhere, and it would tweet out whenever there was a measured seismic event. It it was really amusing and possibly even provided, utility to some people. I don't know. There wasn't a meaningful earthquake in the time that I lived in San Francisco. But flooding, other forms of weather event, like there was a whole dialogue on the Vergecast at some point in the last couple of weeks about weather apps and the bizarre morass of how do weather apps get data and who are they paying in order to source that data, and all of the machinations there that filter through to there are a lot of weather apps that are available in either Google or Apple's App Store, and a significant percentage of them are just kind of scammy. Google could become the entity that says we can operate the ecological disaster warning system for the entire planet, and we can probably afford to do it in a way that very few other entities could. I, for one, would like that future. Call me, you know, call me whatever you want. Bloomberg. Hong Kong outlines crypto trading rules for Bitcoin, Ether, and other large coins, letting retail investors trade them on licensed exchanges starting on June 1st. It's an interesting little constellation of stories here in the crypto malarkey bucket. Hong Kong outlining their own set of crypto regulations, the IOSCO body putting forth draft global crypto regulations. Seems like maybe it's not that. Maybe by the end of this year, there will be an obvious front runner for that floor of regulation, which allows the earnest actors in the cryptocurrency industry to operate in a way that is in implicit, if not explicit, compliance with the authorities that we, the people of various nations, entrust with the responsibility of protecting us against being robbed of our life savings. I think that'd be read. Rhiannon Williams. Meta unveils open source AI models the company says can identify 4,000 plus languages and produce speech for 1,000 plus languages, a 40x and 10x increase, respectively. You want to talk about why we need AI to be diffused into as many applications as possible and to be made available as quickly as possible? This is an application that I think is highly defensible. Is there a conversation to be had around preserving a particular language? Absolutely. I personally think it would be short-sighted to look at Meta putting forth this sort of technology and say, what this is going to do is destroy languages because it's going to allow the preponderance of Meta's customers, which I imagine are English speakers, to perpetuate only needing to understand English because the applications will exist that can seamlessly translate whatever language they confront into English. I don't disagree with that. I just think that it's, quite frankly, equally possible that it makes it easier than ever for me as a human being who only really knows how to speak English to more effectively learn how to speak French, how to speak Spanish, how to speak Mandarin, how to speak Hawaiian. It's going to bring language education forward. And I think it would be, again, naive to ignore that that's absolutely going to be a part of the what's possible with advances like what Meta's putting forth. So keep it up, y'all.